Hello and welcome to episode number 85 of Daily Global Insights. I'm your host Sree Iyer. Today is the 28th of January 2021. As always, I have our guest Sridhar Chityadi. Sridharji, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel.
Namaskar and good morning to everybody.
Sridharji, there have been a spate of executive orders issued by Joe Biden, I should say President Joe Biden. And this is now becoming a bit of a pattern because if you remember in the early days of the Trump administration, also there was a lot of activity, but that's nowhere close to what we are seeing now with Joe Biden. I should say President Joe Biden. And why do you think this is happening? And plus, with a pandemic raging, what is the reason for the emphasis on clean energies, shutting down Keystone Pipeline, and so on and so forth? What do you make of all this flurry of executive orders?
I think Mr. Joe Biden is remote controlled or is being managed by the various factions within the Democratic Party, right? So the whole objective of this exercise, which we discussed, was the progressive agenda, because many of these activities are now beginning to take shape, not just purely through executive actions. We'll get to that in a second, but also through the systematic infusion or systematic communication, okay, that is taking place during the hearings of the various nominees. We have had Janet Yellen, we have had Antony Blinken, we also had, Taylor Thomas Greenfield, the UN ambassador nominee. Then we have also had the energy secretary who is being heard, Jennifer Holm. So you're beginning to see a pattern. And the pattern that is reflecting here is much closer and closer proximity to China. For example, in the case of the Paris Accord, as well as in the case of climate change, you saw Antony Blinken raise the point around, how can we while we have differences, how can we work with China? Similarly, Janet Yellen making a statement on one day that she has fiscal tools, and then the next day saying, well, we have to be united with the other countries and we can't be unilateral in our approach. So you're seeing one strand of thought. In fact, yesterday, Ted Cruz basically, took John Kelly apart, and talked about, hey, you guys are now even introducing Huawei, and you also introduced a ban on calling it as China virus during this first 100 days. So are we moving towards this whole concept of a China surrender and China move, and you are surreptitiously bringing it? So there is one strand of thought which is developing around that, and this is being called out, including Tom Cotton called out. Then you have another strand of thought, which is to say, now these are the progressive agendas. What are the progressive agendas? Number one, they stopped the border wall. That's through an executive order, 5,000 jobs. It is being challenged by CBP. Then you had the Keystone XL pipeline. That has been terminated, right? And that is being challenged, and there is a hold on that. Then we have, stopping of lease in federal land and federal waters. That is being challenged in Wyoming. Then you have the what you call as the decriminalization of border crossing, as well as zero tolerance being eliminated through executive. That is actually being challenged by the Attorney General of Texas. Okay, that case was filed on the 27th, basically saying that you're creating potential security threat to the states by virtue of these actions. There's also we covered a little bit of that yesterday. So the latest kind of the salvo that is coming is that the Patrick Morrisey of West Virginia, in partnership with five attorney generals of the five other states of Arkansas, Indiana, Mississippi, Montana, and Texas, have actually now filed a case, or in the process of filing a case. They have sent a letter before they file the case. They say that before we challenge these executive orders, we will give the opportunity for you to sit with us and discuss. If you don't give us the opportunity, and if you still persist with the orders, but we have no choice but to challenge, what they're saying is that there is a very fine line agreement as part of the federation between the role of an executive and that of implementation of various policies within the states. This is the federal state architecture. And they're saying this is the fundamental tenet of the Constitution is being violated. This is no different. This is no different to the same concept which was filed during the elections, especially by the Texas Attorney General. But given the magnitude of the case that was kind of passed and that may probably come up, this is around, can one state follow the constitutional tenet in terms of framing the rules, and that those framing of rules resting with the legislature, as opposed to what happened in some of the battleground states where the rules were framed not by the state legislature but by executive branch and the judicial branch. So you are seeing a strand of activities coming through these executive orders. Then you have the minimum wage, $15. One is federal, one is state, as part of the stimulus package, right? That's not yet been approved, but that is very much in the bill. So what we are witnessing is this spate of executive orders coming at a frenzy. The most astonishing part in this is this whole thing around the new energy, banning of the fracking. John Kerry went on to say the climate accord is an absolute imperative because to preserve the energy. And when asked what's the rationale, is obviously emission controls. And what's the alternative? Well, we have the alternative through solar, wind, and other formats, and especially solar will create the jobs for these blue-collar workers who are getting displaced from the fracking. And that was taken apart, which is to state that's just a load of rubbish, because the reason is everybody knows that's not going to be the case. So you have, as you rightly set the context by saying, we have a pandemic and we have unemployment, then we have a stimulus bill, and right on the threshold of that, these things are being done with immediate effect, which has job consequences.
So a clarification, CBP means Customs and Border Patrol, which is what Sridharji led with. I just wanted to expand that. Also, Sridharji, the United States government is suspending sale of arms to United Arab Emirates and Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. What was the rationale behind that?
That's another executive action that has been passed, right? The thing is that there's a fundamental difference between the foreign policy of United States versus foreign policy of Donald Trump versus foreign policy of Mr. Joe Biden. Certain states were excluded from getting access to the arms, and what, for example, maybe some of the Middle Eastern states which are in the exempt list. Some of the other Middle Eastern states which are now part of the West Asia, or using the word interchangeably here, it is not Middle East, it is West Asia, as kind of corrected by one of the experts from the region. So West Asia, so some of the West Asian countries, which is now form part of the group with whom Israel has struck a deal. So they are saying if you have to progress the Iranian deal, which was floated again by Antony Blinken and to some extent by Joseph Biden, the President Joe Biden, then the question that's going to come up is if you want us to stop enrichment and stop the nuclear, what you call as the creation of nuclear bombs, and stop drilling the oil until we comply with the conditions, then Iran is going to say, hey, you have armed those people with teeth. They are hurting us potentially in Lebanon and Syria and Iran, and causing nuclear threat to us. You saw the notes from Israel and also from President Trump. There's also this classification that is going on about in Yemen around the Houthis. So where Iran has got its hands deep. You're going to arm one guy with all the stealth, equipment and planes, and on the other side, you are asking me to sit quiet and comply with no right to defend myself. I mean, I'm assuming they have not made this very explicit. That's why they say they would reassess. This is the new administration under Biden. They would reassess. My gut instincts is this is what this is all about. This is one facet. Shifting to the other side, to Taiwan. So you have, Taiwan has been given drones and the radar, as well as they are also going to be sold some of the the J-35 planes, F-35 planes. And the question therefore is China is also another player in the room, which is exerting pressure that why you are giving all these things when you want to work with us very closely. No, though Biden has not formally indicated to that effect that he's going to open the doors, but there's enough noise coming through the confirmation process that says that some of these players are putting pressure on Biden in terms of reassessing the arms sales.
Viewers, it is President Biden, even though sometimes we may not say the word president in front of it, we are still getting used to the terminology. No disrespect intended towards the president. He is the president of the United States of America. Moving on, Senator Tom Carper of Delaware has introduced a bill to make Washington, D.C. the 51st state of the United States. Again, it begs the question, what is the rush to do it now? Because there are so many other pressing problems. The Senate is still not even seeing eye to eye in terms of what to do as far as impeachment is concerned, stimulus is concerned. So what is the rush to do this thing? I don't know. Perhaps you know, sir, you can explain why this is so important?
There are two reasons, both Puerto Rico as well as this
Washington, D.C., yeah.
Washington D.C. is in the radar of the socialists. Remember, you have this game of 15-10 or 35, 35. There is an imbalance that exists in terms of the number of states with Republican and number of states with Democrats. They're trying to bite on that as quickly as possible. That's number one. Number two, I think the Democrats have a very strong control in Washington, D.C. They don't want the policies to be dictated if it is not a state. So they would like most critical policies around or around the security and the administration. You have seen what has happened in the Western state, in the Western states like Washington State, and you have seen what's happening in Portland. You have seen what's happening in California. You have seen similar incidents in D.C. If you are in charge, just like in New York, you are in charge. You can enforce policies. And no better place other than being in DC and embarrassing and presenting a show to the world. That's exactly what happened here. Now, this is normal political bickering between the Republicans and Democrats. So if you are a Democratic president, then the Republicans embarrass. If you are a Republican president, the Democrats embarrass. That was the case. Pandemic or no pandemic doesn't matter to them. Only what matters is their political rhetoric.
I'm reminded of some of these periodic things that come up in the state of California. Two things happen. One is that they want California to secede. And then somebody will say, oh, wait, you have to have 5 states to agree for any state of the United States to secede. So there it will end. The next thing they will try to say is, oh, we want to split up California into 5 parts because it is too big now to govern. I mean, these are all stories that, come up, cause a ripple and then die away. I don't know if the 51st state of Washington, D.C. is one such thing. We'll wait and see. So Department of Homeland Security sees a heightened threat environment from now up until perhaps the progress of the impeachment. And they even want to keep the National Guard in the capital city. Some are not for it. See, the thing is, this is unprecedented in the sense that United States has always felt that it can guard itself. After all, DC is a small area. There's already a local police. There's also Capitol Police. What is the need for still keeping the National Guard? Now that the inauguration has come and gone, I don't see why this is being still kept. Perhaps you can, throw some light on this.
Well, I told you this whole Washington, D.C. impeachment and many of the actions the Biden administration is engaged in presently in the midst of, I say, 3 major problems: pandemic, economic, and the imminent threat of China. Okay, the imminent threat of China. in the middle of these three things, there is a power vacuum. Instead of focusing on those three, they're trying to focus on these mundane matters. Basically, there is a suspicion lurking in the mind of the Republicans, is something cooking, which is why, and that is not being made public to us or transparent, which is why you have a contingent of 15,000 people stationed in Washington, D.C., in the middle of an impeachment hearing or in the imminent threshold of an impeachment hearing. So this is what is driving people to nuts, which is to say, why? What's the agenda here? Okay. Now we are far more organized, far more prepared. There is no 1 million, 2 million people assembling here to run a what you call they use the word insightful session that was conducted by President Trump, past President Trump. So I think there is that part. So that is why Senator Tom Cotton from Republican from Arkansas has raised this issue. So how do you justify it? Then you justify by saying, hey, there is some noise in the system which says that there is a potential kind from unknown dissatisfied people who would be coming. Therefore, we need to have this footprint. And by the way, this footprint these people have to be here till March 31st. Okay, the date is March 31st.
Looking at global news, Marco Rubio, senator from Florida, has called for a consensus on dealing with China. By that, does he mean inside the United States or across the world?
So I think before I answer, I just want to also make sure that one other important point, which I also failed yesterday to communicate, which is important. This impeachment process, which we touched on, and we touched on the security, is not a foregone conclusion because there's 45 senators who have stood and voted very clearly against impeachment. So which means there is no clear vote for that. Okay. Similarly, I think that there is a democratic move that is going on, which is effectively to say this whole process looks, null and void. This is, Democratic Senator Mr. Kane stating that making a move, whether we should pass an opposite resolution, which is to stop the impeachment process. This, because of the left media, you don't get the coverage. Remember, all you need is 51 votes. Today, Republicans have 50, notwithstanding 5 swung the other way, and of which 2 people, Senator Murkowski, Susan Collins, have expressed concerns that now we know there is no vote. What are we going through? And also, President Trump is not going to be present. He's only going to give a written response. So under those circumstances, there is a parallel move that is going on to reverse this. It's conceivable that we may see in due course that a resolution passed. All you need is a simple majority, 51 to 50, while everybody has been sworn in and ready and so on. When February 9th comes, there may be a resolution, or before that there's a resolution, so this could go away. I just wanted to leave that point that it is not a fait accompli that this whole process is going to kind of go through. Sorry for making that observation, sir.
Back to our question, is Rubio calling for a consensus against China inside the United States, or is he meaning the entire world?
I think that he's first and foremost, he's talking about inside the United States, which is to have a concerted approach between Democrats and Republicans, because clearly, as I said, the context that the hearings has baffled them. And the messages and the news that are coming from the present administration led by President Biden is not very encouraging to the Republican Party.
The United States says that it will return to the Iran nuclear deal once Tehran meets its commitments. This is according to the newly appointed Secretary of State. In fact, he has been confirmed, Anthony Blinken. And along with that, the Chief of Staff of Israel's Defense Forces said last week that Iran is close, just months or weeks away from developing a nuclear weapon, according to the Times of Israel. So if you juxtapose these two things, there is no deal.
Well, there's no deal. And this is where your earlier question that comes in, which is namely, why there is a temporary halt in sales to certain arms sales to nations. It's very clear that Iran and Israel are moving in the opposite direction. Okay, Israel has made it very clear that they are days, if not few weeks or months, from nuclear bomb. They have a fully enriched uranium. The second, their illegal exports of oil as well as the pumping of the oil has gone beyond the threshold of the UN sanctions. Third, even more complicated, they have now found there is footprint and presence of Al Qaeda in Iran. So Israel is not bending down, and Israel is saying that we are getting ready for an imminent attack because there's no point in regretting later. Whereas on the contrary, in their own naivete, the present administration seems to think they can negotiate. I see the reminiscences of all of this as to what happened during Obama-Biden years in South China Sea. I know Democrats would like to debate this particular point. I have debated with them. I've also debated in policy think tanks on this point. It is Obama and Biden who single-handedly in 8 years made sure that South China Sea and China's belligerence was strengthened all around South China Sea. Okay, we talk about joining all these international groups, WHO and Paris Accord and all these kinds of groups. In the when the dispute came between Scarborough Shoals dispute came between China and Philippines. When International Court of Justice ruled in favor of Philippines, China said it cares two hoofs in terms of the ICJ and it is not a signatory. So where is all these international accords? Are these international accords basically to suit China by the Biden administration? Or is it they have a precedent? Same thing on the no-fly zone that was imposed in Pacific. So what we are witnessing here is similar kind of acts, and I hope Iran is not allowed to get away with whatever it is doing, and there is some semblance of enforcement. If Biden doesn't do it, this is not China. Israel will do it.
Yes, indeed, and we have been seeing this. Iran tried to poison the desalination water systems of Israel, and Israel hit back. They disabled the largest port on the Iranian, seacoast, and they had to manually put back. The computers went down. This is something that happened a few months ago. We have an in-depth hangout on this on PGurus channel. You can look at that. I just wanted to say that this is far from over. Let's take a quick look at the markets before we sign off for today, sir. Yesterday, all broad across the segments, we had a pullback. In fact, based on Jeremy Powell's statement that the economy has a long way to go. How do futures look today? What do you see for today? And we are also going to talk about the Fed, the deficits, and all that stuff tomorrow, isn't it?
Correct. We'll try to paint the picture of a balance sheet, 2019 and 2020. We'll also showcase in that the flow of stimulus, the consequences that is to the balance sheet, and then the proportionate increase in the deficit that occurred as a result of that. Okay, so the markets were quite tepid, and then initially started with tepid, and then it tanked more than 600 points. In fact, 633 points it tanked. What is the reason for 633 points for it to tank? Basically, there was a very important statement. Every word of the Fed is watched by the markets very closely. Economy has a long way to go for recovery. So when they said for foreseeable future, two important things. One is the interest rates will continue to be zero. Second, the asset purchase program of $120 billion will continue. We don't see any inflationary headwinds, nor we see any imminent reduction in the unemployment unless there is a sustained kind of capital flow into the system. And capital and credit are not constrained. So the story is the capital is coming via stimulus, the credit is through the asset purchase program opening up bits and pieces of the balance sheet, opening steadily the balance sheet of the Fed. So the story is that sent the stocks kind of going down. Also, yesterday there was earnings reports from a number of companies. Barring Apple, many of the companies did not meet the expectations, and you saw even the tech stocks like Microsoft, Alphabet, Tesla, Netflix, AMD, all lose between 4 to 5% in one single day in their prices. So this is what you are seeing. And the Fed statement is very, very clear, which is zero rates, stimulus needed, 120 billion. They're not cutting the $120 billion per month asset purchase program. And the pandemic is ravaging. And we need to see. So even the 5% or 4.2% growth only still puts the economy in 2021 slightly below where it was in 2020. Okay, so almost, if not equal, to where it was in 2019.
So we are going to look at the big picture tomorrow, and we're also going to look at what are the various headwinds that are affecting the United States growth, and by extension world's growth, because United States has always been the one that has been leading economies out of recession. You have, at least for quarter to quarter, we have experienced a V-shaped recovery. However, with the stimulus talk still going on, and we also will look at what happened on the $910 billion stimulus deal that President Donald Trump had signed off before he demitted office. So you have that, and then you have the new one, $1.9 trillion from President Joseph Biden. So you have a lot of stuff on their plate, and that's where the focus ought to be, because I think the unemployment numbers are again inching up. We will not be surprised if it again touches 1 million. And we will talk all about this and more tomorrow, Friday. Thanks for watching. Please do subscribe to our channel. And once again, Sridharji, my heartfelt appreciation for you sparing so much of your time and effort in joining us and keeping us enthralled on this. Thank you very much. Namaskaram, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you. Namaskar, and have a wonderful day.